What is up, YouTube? Oh man. Somebody commented on a video the other day and it gave me a good idea for a video. Talking about how modern day gaming for personally our kids and stuff is way different than it was for us. Now, I was born in 1987, so I grew up right around the time that Nintendo basically took off. Uh, and it's obviously things have changed a lot over the years, but the biggest thing I think is the availability of games. So growing up, we, like most families, didn't have a ton of money, and games were not very cheap, guys. I know a lot of people complain nowadays about how expensive games are getting, $70 a pop, but back in the day, they were $70 to $80 a pop, especially for Super Nintendo games. Now, I did a video in the past showing an ad from a Toys R Us, and I think Super Mario World was like 80, 90 bucks or something like that. So, what we were forced to do a lot of times was rent. And yeah, a lot of these kids are gonna be like, what the heck's renting mean? For video games and everything like that. Well, see, instead of subscriptions and stuff like that, we had to physically go to a store like Blockbuster, Movie Gallery, Captain Video, which was one of my favorites as a kid. And we gotta basically borrow a game for a day or so, and then we had to bring it back. And if we didn't bring it back, we got late fees. And I know a lot of you that watch my channel, I think the age demographic is, low mid-20s to late 30s, so you guys know exactly what I'm talking about, especially the guys that are a little bit older too that follow the channel. But that was like a huge thing, was renting video games, because it was hard to buy video games because they were so dang expensive. And then on top of that, you get an NES game and it would suck or something. A lot of times we had to go by what Nintendo Power said, or your buddy, or if you rented a game a couple times and you really enjoyed it, then you'd go out and actually buy it. And the other real big thing was physical media then was a lot more cool than it was now, obviously. When you bought something, you actually obviously got it. We're not going to go over that. But not only did you have a nice cartridge that was there, or disc, or even a disc, but you also had a manual, you had a cool case, or you even had a box to put it in. Now, some of my favorite cases and stuff was the Sega Genesis clamshells, because not only did you got, the manual inside of it, but you got the nice cool like little clamshell that you can open and close, and you could just put your game in there. And it seems like nowadays you don't see them as much as they once were, and obviously that's probably because everybody just kind of threw them out. Much like, you can see the NES boxes back there. Most of the times when we got games as a kid, we just ripped the box apart, got the game out, and then put it in, and we just had stacks and stacks of it. And I know you can kind of see down there, sorry I just keep pointing there, but that was actually a case to hold your NES games in. So why did we need the box? I'm guessing a lot of cardboard, guys, over the years was just tossed in the, oh man, I wonder, if the junkyards and stuff would still have any. I know a buddy of mine who has a friend that is in the junk, whatever, landfill, there we go. They'll find random video game stuff all the time. But guys, that was one huge thing, was we got so much more physical media stuff. And, obviously we didn't have the internet. We couldn't, search, we had the internet later on, but when you were super young, you couldn't search up, exactly how to do stuff in video games, or get a backstory or stuff like that. So that's what was cool about having a manual. And one of the most nostalgic memories of mine would be when we did finally buy a video game, and we'd be driving home, and I'd just sit there and read that game, the manual, the box, the case, whatever it was in, up and down, front to back, just so I could, I just had to soak it all in. And unfortunately, with the way stuff is nowadays, that's not how it goes anymore. You don't, I guess you can YouTube it. You can kind of see what people think of it, which might in the end be a better pro than anything, because obviously you're going to see what you're getting into before you purchase the game. Like I said, a lot of times we didn't know what we were getting. We didn't know what we were getting into unless we rented it, or a buddy had it. And a lot of times we were just shooting in the dark and hoping that the game was good. I'm trying to think of some other stuff now. a huge thing that, I was thinking about this the other day when I was in Walmart, when we used to have, kiosks everywhere. And if you kids, you youngins, if you don't know what kiosks were, a lot of times you could go to Walmart or something and your mom would drop you off in the she would drop you off in the video game section and electronics, and your whole thing would be is to sit there. They would have a joystick or a controller just sitting there, in the kiosk, and you'd just play like this. Like, I'm surprised we don't have, my generation doesn't have horrible neck and horrible back problems. We've got back problems because everybody does when they get older. But horrible neck problems, because I would sit there. Mom would shop for hours, guys. I swear, she'd be there for hours, it felt like that. And I would just sit there the whole time. And I remember one big game I loved to play whenever I would go there was Diddy Kong Racing. And they had 2 controllers, which was crazy sometimes. So a lot of times, another kid would be in the same boat, We'd show up. I'd go to one side, and whatever kid would be there would do the other, and we'd race each other on what was essentially a demo disc. And I just remembered it was so fun doing this. And you just don't, even McDonald's, guys. I've seen people find old kiosks that were in McDonald's that you could play while when you were done eating your food and you were worn out from actually climbing around in the playground area that they had. On the ball pit, that's not even around anymore. Kids probably don't even know what ball pits are anymore. But it's just crazy how things have changed, You'd get 1 or 2 games every few months. You didn't have, the nice, cool 200 game option whenever you would subscribe to Game Pass or PlayStation Plus or Nintendo Online. You wouldn't have the options for all these free, well, it's not free games, but you know what I mean. You wouldn't have all these available games. You would essentially get Friday night, like I saw somebody share this on a reel the other day, and it really pulled me back. And it was just like, it's $19.99, it's Friday night, you're hitting up Pizza Hut, you're going to Blockbuster, you're gonna rent games for 2 days. Life is good. And that was essentially what we loved. That was the perfect weekend for me as a kid. Picking up a buddy to spend the night for the weekend, or going over to a buddy's house to spend the night, renting a couple games, even a couple movies. Like, I still to this day remember when we rented Mortal Kombat when I was really young. And that first night after we got done playing games for a while, we decided to watch the movie. I remember my buddy and I watched, I think we watched it 3 times in a row. 2 to 3 times in a row, because it was just so awesome to us. The 90s especially was all about, karate, ninjas and everything. So Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, even a little video a movie that not very many people know about, Surf Ninjas, which was one of Rob Schneider's first movies, was amazing. I still it's been, God, how many years since this, but I could still vividly remember us sitting there and doing that. And nowadays, I just feel like it's not, I guess it's hard to say, because most kids, unlike adults, live in the now. They are thinking more about the present than the future or the past. And as an adult, unfortunately, we do not have that. Yeah, we don't have that. Because we are thinking about the bills coming up. We're thinking about sports games coming up. We're thinking about, something that's associated with work, doctor's appointments, and we're always not really in the present. And, it's crazy to think that maybe this generation's going to have a totally different experience, obviously, than we did. And who's to say what the next generation's going to get? We talk nowadays about how Xbox could be disappearing console-wise. Obviously, they'll still be around. They could be focusing more on Game Pass and stuff. But just remembering as when I was a kid and how it is different now. We joked the other day. I was in a Shady J stream, and in one of their recent videos, they talked about how when growing up, they had a PlayStation, but they didn't have a memory card. So they had to leave Final Fantasy on for days, Final Fantasy VII. And I, too, had that unfortunate thing, and that's funny that it's burned in my brain, and it was so funny, is that, I didn't have a memory card for my PlayStation, so at some point I was stuck with my Final Fantasy VII running for like 2 weeks straight, and I remember covering up the power light so that way if my dad came into the room or something, he wouldn't see it on and shut it off, because otherwise I'd have to go back. Because a lot of you know it took about, I felt like 10 hours before you even got out of Midgar, and that alone was a whole Saturday of me playing. But it's just different nowadays, obviously. I mean, like I said, the huge thing is all the different consoles, too. Now, a big thing was I watched the Console Wars documentary, and it really reminded me of this. You had a Sega kid, and you had a Super Nintendo kid. I didn't have any friends that had both consoles. It was one or the other. And when I was a Sega kid growing up, which was, it is what it is. Obviously, a Super Nintendo to me has a lot more better games, but I'm very nostalgic for the Sega Genesis. And it's not to say that it didn't have the worst games ever. Honestly, it's still to this day, it had some of my favorite sports titles, like NHL 94, Mutant League Hockey, Mutant League Football, and all these other fun little games and stuff like that. And I just remember playing it a lot of times too with my friends. And yeah, it's just, I think, a lot of times it's not that we forget how it is. I just think nowadays, like I said, we're too busy thinking about the past and the future, and not much as in the present. I like making these kinds of videos because it reminds me of, when times were simpler, growing up, playing games. Can't wait for the weekend, like I said, because you get pizza and you get to rent stuff. But nowadays, like I said, I think we're spoiled, and I think our kids are spoiled for all the availability of games. And it's funny too, because they have all these games at their disposal, and they still play, Fortnite, just Call of Duty, some of those other ones. Like me, like nowadays, I there's so much stuff that comes on here that I don't even know what to play anymore. And obviously I have adult money, so that's what I'm running into now, is just all this. I have all this stuff, and that's why I sold a lot of it, because I didn't even know what to play anymore. But I'm kind of getting off subject here. I want to know in the comments below, what is something that you guys really miss from your childhood. And even having a Game Boy and you couldn't play it in the dark while you were riding around unless you had bought the attachment to play it in. That's another thing that just kind of came to mind too. But yeah, I want to know in the comments below what you guys think about this video. What is something from your childhood that you remember fondly, that you're very nostalgic for, that kids nowadays might not ever experience again? And yep, make sure you comment it below. But yeah, thank you guys for this. Thank you for hanging out with me while I take a trip down memory lane. And yeah, this video was just basically talking about how things are different nowadays. Not necessarily retro versus modern, but millennials against the new ones. And obviously the older generations too probably have something too. So if you got something that was obviously before the 90s and late 80s, that's something that we never probably experienced, that you're very nostalgic for, make sure you let me know below. I'd love to read you guys' comments, so make sure that you take the time to leave me a comment today. But that being said, as always guys, stay retro my friends, and I will see you in the next video. Peace out.